Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the meeting of the Thursday, October 30th Delta Stewardship Council, being brought to you live from the Convention Center at Sacramento, where the Bay Delta Science Program has been underway since Tuesday. I'd like to begin starting at first base and working our way around the diamond for the roll call. Fiorini here.
Eisenberg here.
We have a quorum, and with that, we will now dismiss to closed executive session. For those of you that are following along on the webcast, I believe we will be reconvening an open session around 9:45. So we are now resuming to closed session. No action taken in closed session. For the record, Council members Rustaller and Damrell have joined us, and we again have a quorum. I'd like to proceed to file item number 5, the Chair's report. Just briefly, a few things to mention. One, our Executive Officer, Jessica Pearson, is officially on maternity leave. And Dan Ray, our Chief Deputy, is filling in for her and will be providing the Executive Officer's report today. Staff has launched, as we mentioned last month, the Levee investment strategy. I have been involved in a number of outreach meetings with stakeholders, collecting information in regards and in support of the Levee investment strategy work that the Stewardship Council has undertaken. The interim science action agenda has been posted. Public comment period, I believe, is over, and you'll hear more about that from Dr. Goodwin later. A significant piece of work that we are all very, very pleased with the work of the science program. The preparation for the November 17th Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee work is nearing the stages of formalizing an agenda. Taran Ravizini has been very, very busy meeting with agency staff among the 17 state and federal agencies involved, and we anticipate that the November 17th meeting is going to be a very meaningful, helpful, useful meeting. I had the opportunity to address, one other thing. On October 20th, for anyone who missed it, Governor Brown made a significant water policy speech. He delivered it to a group in Stanford, and I was personally very, very impressed with his grasp of the issues. He did an excellent job providing a 50-year history of the kinds of water issues that we have been dealing with and continue to deal with, and from his personal perspective as a governor 30 years ago, facing some of the same issues today, and his view that we need to make water policy a very, very high priority in the next several years was very, very encouraging. Equally encouraging was the fact that he mentioned the Delta Stewardship Council as a key agency to help address issues in the Delta, so we're pleased about that. I hope that you've had an opportunity to participate in some of the presentations here at the Science Conference, the panels, the poster displays downstairs. Crazy, unbelievably good, the amount of information that has disseminating around here. It has caused me, a 4-semester chemistry student at Cal Poly, to go back to the periodic table and review some of the terms that are used in some of these presentations. And then Tuesday I had the privilege of providing an address to the general session. And I want, for those of you that missed it, I used the San Francisco Giants in baseball as an example of how to build effective teamwork. And that was on Tuesday, the day prior to the 6th game where they could have clinched the championship. They chose to make it more interesting and waited until the 7th game last night to win the World Championship. So I was pleased to be able to use the Giants as an example of building effective teamwork here, and as an example of how we can do a better job working together, policymakers and scientists. But I'm also glad that they won the World Championship last night. That concludes my comments, file item 5. Unless anyone has any questions, we'll move on now to file item 6, Executive Officers Report. Chief Deputy Dan Ray.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our discussion today. Too, I've been in and out of the conference, but I am looking forward to our conversation later today with Dr. Collier and Dr. Goodwin and others about sort of what we've learned so far in the conversations we've been engaged in, because there certainly is a lot going on. I was on a panel yesterday afternoon that stimulated some conversation. And I also, like you, Randy, I went through the poster sessions, and it's an astonishing catalog of work underway. You know, at the heart of this meeting is going to be a related briefing by Dr. Haneke and others on the coordination and integration of various scientific monitoring activities that are underway in the Delta, how we can gather more value from the effort that's being undertaken by just a whole host of state, federal, local agencies as we're trying to pursue this one Delta One science concept. And then we're also going to receive a briefing on the Levee investment strategy, including a review of a charge that the lead scientists to develop for the independent panel that will be reviewing the science supporting the Levee investment strategy methodology. And I think your comments too about the governor's remarks about the importance of the Delta Stewardship Council's work and his overall emphasis on water over the next few years was certainly noteworthy. I also thought important in the last month was the announcement by Mayor Garcetti down in Los Angeles, the executive order that he signed that directed, called for the city to reduce freshwater use by 20% by 2017, and committed the city to cut in half the amount of imported water that the Department of Water and Power purchases. He's going to try to achieve that goal by 2024 through a combination of treating groundwater and capturing and storing stormwater and using recycled water and encouraging conservation and other green infrastructure so they can build the city's local water supply. And of course, Metropolitan Water District also announced an important commitment that same day, increasing financial incentives that they're making available to their member agencies to develop recycled water and recover groundwater and pursue desalination. So it's great to see such progress as folks try to diversify their local supplies and become more resilient. I thought I wanted to update the council too on some of the activities that we've been undertaking to keep the Delta plan in front of agencies that are developing projects by commenting on their environmental impact reports and statements. That's one of the authorities that the council has, and also a way that we use to encourage folks to be looking at the requirements of the Delta plan early and addressing them as they further their projects. So in the last month, we've written in comments on 3 significant projects. One is the Honker Bay Conservation Bank. It would be a habitat restoration project on the south side of Sassoon Marsh. It's being developed by a for-profit mitigation banker that has a lot of experience in this field. A concern with the project is that a worry that some agencies have that as the project is developed, it could compromise the levees along the outer edge of Sassoon Marsh in a way that might ultimately lead to damage to the Department of Water Resources Roaring River distribution system that brings water in to serve the waterfowl clubs and the duck hunting areas inside Sassoon. So that's a project that we're watching, likely to come to us as a covered action in the coming months. We've also commented on a project that the Reclamation District 1601 on Twitchell Island is proposing to set back a significant area of levee they have there along the San Joaquin River. And that would be a project that would do a variety of things that the Delta Plan encourages. But also it's important that its adaptive management program be well designed. You know, the Delta Plan calls for setting back levees where feasible along those migratory corridors for salmon, and there's not a tremendous amount of information really on how effective those projects have been, and so making sure that each project, time we do a project like this, we learn what we can is important. Finally, we've sent in a comment letter on the Bureau of Reclamation's Upper San Joaquin River Basin Storage Project. That's the Temperance Flat Reservoir. You know, like most federal environmental impact statements, most federally prepared ones, it was a very thorough report. Interestingly, one of the things that they've identified as a potential value of the storage is it could provide an emergency water supply that could be used in the event that diversions from the Delta are interrupted, either because of Delta levees would fail, and so you would be able to use a portion of this supply to flush salinity that might otherwise intrude into the Delta. Help to keep it at bay, or else could be provided an alternative supply to south of Delta users in that instance. And so we asked for a little more information about how that might work. Also encourage them to better explain how the supply that would be created might be used in conjunction with groundwater management to get a better local water supplies and more resilience in the area. And finally, we asked for more information about how the environmental benefits of the project in terms of the opportunity for flows that might help encourage floodplain restoration and fisheries restoration, how that might be better documented. So those are three important things we've gotten out the door in the last month. On the administrative side, we've got two new staff members have joined us this month. Maggie Chrisman, who's joined the science program staff, should be working with Lauren Hastings, is one of our adaptive management liaisons hired this month. And Megan Brooks, who'd been working for us as an intern over the last few summers, I think, actually maybe a whole year, has been hired as an environmental scientist in our performance management program. Randy mentioned that Jessica Pearson's attorney leave is begun, but I think I want to assure people that she's just not sitting home watching Ellen and directing the nursery, at least from the emails that we're getting. She's still actively following what we're doing, so I give her a little shout out right here, Jessica, and know that we're all wishing you and your family well and for a healthy and a prompt delivery. So with that, I would turn it back to you, sir.
Any questions of Dan? Dan, thank you very much. On to file item 6A, legislative update. Unless you have anything, Dan, I don't think there is a report.
The legislature's not in session, and we've had no communications with them recently.
So, Chris Stevens, legal update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to invite to the table here our legal intern, Cody Phillips, who's presented before you, most recently at the past meeting. And as you know, from time to time, we like to give the council updates on Delta-related litigation, regulatory actions, and other matters of interest separate from the Delta Plan litigation. And just with regard to the Delta Plan litigation, though, as you all know, the opening briefs in the consolidated, coordinated cases titled Delta Plan litigation, 7 cases that were filed against the council. The briefs were filed on October 15th, so we've got a big stack of papers to go through, and your legal team is working furiously behind the scenes to help mount a vigorous defense. So I wanted you to know that. But in any event, I'll turn it over to Cody. He's got a few things to update you on. Thank you.
Morning, Cody.
Morning, everyone. So there are a few legal developments that we would like to bring to the council's attention at this meeting, most of which actually center around the Endangered Species Act. But before we get to those cases, we would like to bring to the council's attention a development that arose this week, actually, between the Friant Water Authority and the State Water Resources Control Board. Friant filed a petition in Fresno County Superior Court for a writ of mandate contesting the executive director of the state board's actions in responding to temporary urgency change petitions over the past 9 months. These petitions were initiated by the governor's emergency regulations and allows users to petition for a change in flow or water quality depending on the needs of those petitioning. Friant is alleging that the executive director's decisions in handling these petitions was unilateral and unlawful and dramatically reduced the water supply for those who depend on it. Friant further alleges that the State Board abdicated its authority to the executive director, which Friant says itself was a flawed and inappropriate action. This development is in its earliest stages, and we will be monitoring it as the issue progresses. Now let us turn to the recent endangered species issues which have arisen. The first case centers around a topic which this council is very familiar with, and that is the Delta smelt. Two petitions for a writ of certiorari regarding the Ninth Circuit's decision in San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority versus Jewel were filed in the Supreme Court of the United States earlier this month. One of the petitions was filed by a group of farmers, and the other petition was filed by the state water contractors and several water districts. The petitioners argued that review by the Supreme Court is warranted in this Delta smelt case because there is a conflict between the Ninth and Fourth Circuits over whether an agency must consider the effects on third parties when proposing reasonable and prudent alternatives to agency action. The petitioners also argued that whether the ESA requires or exempts an agency from considering the economic impact of its proposed restrictions on agency activity on third parties is a question of ongoing importance given that the federal government conducts thousands of Endangered Species Act consultations each year. The petitioners state that by failing to consider the question of feasibility, the Fish and Wildlife Service failed to consider a key facet of the issue, and in so doing acted arbitrarily and capriciously. Petitioners argue, importantly, that this would not mean that the Fish and Wildlife Service would be allowed to balance the value of the life of the Delta smelt against the impact of restrictions on given project operations. Rather, they argue that in choosing among possible alternatives that would avoid jeopardy, an agency would need to consider the impact on effective alternatives on third parties, quote, in order to avoid unnecessary harm to humans in the course of protecting plants and animals, end quote. So the Supreme Court will be evaluating these petitions over the next few months, and we'll keep you posted on what the court decides to do. So quickly, on a related issue, turning from the Delta to the Gulf Coast, we would like to bring your attention to a similar fight surrounding the Endangered Species Act, which has already affected court decisions here in Northern California. That fight is the Fifth Circuit case of the Aransas Project versus Shaw, which involved allegations that the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality had taken endangered whooping cranes by issuing water withdrawal permits that were alleged to have resulted in the deaths of 23 whooping cranes. Reversing the district court, the Fifth Circuit held that the chain of events linking these permits to the deaths of the whooping cranes was not sufficiently direct or foreseeable to sustain a claim under the Endangered Species Act. So closer to home now, this case was recently cited and the reasoning applied in a California case in California River Watch versus County of Sonoma. In that case, the federal court rejected the theory that an agency can be held liable for taking of endangered species simply by issuing permits. The plaintiff in that case alleged that permits which the county issues for vineyard development would harm the endangered California tiger salamander because of the potential for vineyards to be developed in areas that are listed as critical habitat for those species. The plaintiffs therefore claimed that the county should be held liable under the Endangered Species Act for issuing the permits. The federal district court in San Francisco disagreed, holding that the connection between issuing vineyard permits and any potential future harm to these salamanders was too tenuous. And the court found that Riverwatch was not able to single out any specific take that would occur as a result of the permit's issuance, and as such, the case was not ripe for review. These cases have a far broader application than to just whooping cranes and salamanders, and that's why we're updating you on them. The idea of state liability for government-issued water diversion permits through a long line of causation hits especially close to home. Due to the fact that it can be difficult to hold any one party directly responsible for the impact of these activities, however, environmental groups have turned to holding state and local agencies vicariously liable for failing to use their regulatory powers to prevent harm to federally protected species. The Fifth Circuit's decision in the Aransas project will make it difficult for them to do so. With that case, the standard now seems to be that the state and local government regulators are open to liability under the Endangered Species Act only when their actions directly harm protected species. Taken together, the cases that we just discussed show an increasing amount of pressure mounting against the Endangered Species Act in the courts. This pressure, combined with the severity and duration of the drought currently affecting the West in this country, may force the Supreme Court's hand in reevaluating long-held Endangered Species Act precedent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cody. Any questions of Cody? All right. Great job. Thanks. Now on to file item number 7, lead scientist report. Dr. Goodwin. Peter?
So the lead scientist report is very brief this meeting. I'm just going to make a few comments about the science conference, and I think probably Dr. Collier and perhaps even Sam Harrider in a few minutes will add some comments. But first of all, just on behalf of the science community, we'd like to thank the Council for actually participating and you being and walking the corridors of the science conference. As you're aware, the theme of the conference is making connections, and what really makes this conference stand out from other science conferences on big systems is just the number of your policymakers and managers and folks outside the science community that attend. And I hope you also really take pride in this event. Your sponsorship of the event, along with the USGS, allows us to keep the registration fee down to a very low amount, which is why we get such incredible participation in the conference each time we run it. And I'll give some statistics on that in a moment. I'd like to acknowledge the folks that make the conference happen. It's put together by a very broad committee of volunteers. We only have one paid supporter or administrator of the conference. Everything else is done on a volunteer basis. So much of the organization and planning occurs in the evenings and at weekends. And on our staff in the Delta Science Program, Marina Brand has been heavily involved on the organizing committee. Our partners over at the Delta Conservancy have also been active. And Garrett Lyles this year, along with Melissa Decker, led the mentoring luncheon for those of you that attended on Tuesday. But the organizing committee truly captures the full science spectrum. So there's folks from federal agencies, state agencies, and the private sector that participate in supporting the organization of the event. So just a few statistics. As of Tuesday morning, there was well over 1,000 people had registered before the conference, and typically there's likely to be an extra couple of hundred that just walk-ons in Chair Fiorini's terminology. There were 5 plenary talks on the first morning. I'll come to that in a moment. There's also the Brown-Nichols Award, which recognizes the contributions of 2 eminent scientists in helping to initiate the steps that builds the community of science here. And the award that's distributed each year is given not just for an outstanding contribution in science, but it has to be outstanding science that's really contributed to the management decisions that are made on Bay Delta issues. This year, the winner was Ankamula Soga, of course, who was the lead scientist of IEP for many, many years. And she also gave one of the plenary talks about the progress that she's seen in IEP and the redirection, and also some of the challenges of structuring science to inform management decisions. So that was a very nice activity. There's also been 4 panel sessions, as Dan Ray mentioned, and many of you actually sat on one panel or another. There's over 230 oral presentations and almost 200 posters. So if you have time for those folks who are here, just to walk through the posters, it really gives you a great impression of the scope of science activities that are underway. And Chair Fiorini had asked me just to pick out one or two of my personal highlights of the event. And I think on behalf of the science community, we were really struck by the comments of Deputy Secretary Mike Connor. Also the fact that he agreed to come out to give the opening plenary talk. And I think for everyone that was in the room, we were struck by several things. One is, he's clearly passionate about the issues. He's extremely well informed. He also has a background in chemistry, we found out. But I think what he really outlined was not just his in-depth knowledge, but he emphasized the sort of federal-state partnership, the approaches that the federal and state government are taking to address some of these critical water issues in the state. And in addition to that, he spoke about several of the new initiatives that are coming out of the federal government. And I think what was interesting about that was to see just where we are in our thinking in the science community related to those federal initiatives. So one of those was the President's executive order on big data and his order to the various federal agencies to consider interoperability standards and things like that. And he also mentioned the open water data initiatives that's being led by several of the federal agencies, including the USGS. And also, I think he showed his in-depth knowledge of what was going on. He made several references to the co-equal goals in the balancing, and also picked up the concept of one Delta, one science. And here he was saying how science needs to get together to address the issues. So I thought that was just a terrific opening plenary. And of course, with Director Bonham giving the introduction, it's always a lecture in public speaking about how you do these things. A couple of other things. Chair Fiorini mentioned his talk and his desire for you to see action. If I was to pick the one thing there, we can't just sit back and wait for things. And then also Dr. Brand from the Independent Science Board, you gave a very compelling talk about what's being done on other large-scale ecosystem restoration projects where very high technology in terms of sensors are being linked with models to get, in some cases, a real-time understanding of what's happening. Some of the other things, of course, this is just a wonderful event, and one of the things that I've heard is there's too many parallel sessions. People want to be in more than one place at any one time. But a couple of things that came out of this that you might be interested in. If you remember when Dr. Grossinger from SFEI came and spoke to you a little over a year ago about the historical ecological study that was just in the process of being released at that time. And you had asked the question about, well, this is great, how does it actually guide restoration? And at the time, Dr. Grossinger mentioned that they were already underway with the Delta Landscapes project, which is trying to take that understanding of what was important in the historic ecosystem, recognizing there's no way we can restore to any kind of historic condition. But why this work's so important is understanding the key ecological connections that were there historically so it can guide our landscape approach to restoration. And so the update of that report, if you missed it, is actually being released this week. And so the follow-up to that historic study is available now. Another aspect of that study is that Dr. Grossinger and SFEI really reached out right across the science community. So there was a tremendous broad team that have gone into those events. And it may be one of the things that you'd like to hear a report on as a follow-up in one of the coming meetings. A couple of other things that I would highlight. The Delta Smelt life cycle model. This gets back to Chair Fiorini's comment in the town hall meeting at the start of the science conference. How do you really, 2 years ago, how do you understand consequences across many competing factors that would affect Delta Smelt or or any other species. So the Delta smelt life cycle model has been under development for about 2 years now. And on the day before the conference, there was a workshop where Dr. Newman and his team described where they are right now. And concurrently, providing everyone doesn't rush out of the door, he's giving a talk just about now where he's talking about the experiments that have been going on in the last year on experimenting with different techniques of detecting where smelt are. So it's an experimental evaluation of the different methodologies that can be used to affect delta smelt and the influence that might have on the modeling effort. There's so many other things that are great. Some of the technologies that are being brought to use. You have 2 of the science fellows that you're funding are giving presentations, one on subsidence in the delta, using the NASA JPL technologies and their overflights to get a very accurate depiction of the differential settling rates across the delta, both for land and for levees. So those were the just a few of the things which really came out, but I'd just like to stress the importance of the value of this kind of meeting. Last night I went to 2 after-poster judging receptions, and the last one was about 11 o'clock at night. The one before that was close to 8:30, just as the Giants game was wrapping up. And the amazing thing is there must have been at least 100 people in both events, and people were looking out of their corner of the eye at the screen, but most of the discussion was about Prospect Island or the Mercury. So it was just a great way. And at those receptions, it wasn't just NGO community, agency communities, it was totally across the board. And so the value of this venue where people can just get together and have a frank exchange on some of these very difficult issues, it truly cannot be underestimated. So I'll stop there unless you have any questions, and then I'll ask our your substitute science fellow, Sam Harada, to come and give you an update of by the numbers. But Sam, you may also want to add just a little bit of perspective if there was anything in particular that occurred to you in this conference. Well, and actually, perhaps while Sam's coming up, I'll just add one thing. Talking to Councilmember Roosdale yesterday, and you mentioned that how you thought the presentations were so clear, this event. And I'd just like to say that the organizing committee have really taken this to heart. They understand that if we're trying to encourage dialogue, particularly into the policy arena, these presentations need to be clear. So I think we got 8 pages of instructions for oral presentations, and I think I violated every law that they gave. But it was very, very clear what they wanted. And so when you see this clear statement of what the problem is, clear conclusions at the end, it isn't an accident. I think it's a tribute to the organizing committee that have really thought through how scientists can best communicate their results. But now Sam's up here, and I don't know if you had anything to add from your personal perspective.
I don't really have much to add, but I have been impressed with the quality of presentations, and it's always like drinking from a fire hose, trying to keep up with, catch as much as you can in a short period of time. I think some of the presentations I've seen have really helped to kind of fill in some of the blanks in life cycle models. I've seen some presentations there, a lot of great stuff on climate change and water supply, so just overall good presentations. So I'll go ahead with by the numbers, and when I look at these and I think about the numbers that are out there in the posters and the presentations, this is really just a tiny bit, and we try to summarize and capture so just some of the key issues going on with the Delta and the Delta watershed. So in this month's report, I've tried to be responsive to some of the comments from the council in the past about trying to give context for it. So in the water storage for Shasta and Oroville, I've used this kind of glass, water glass image. It's really a column chart, and it shows where we are currently. That's the dark bar at the bottom. And the shaded area above that shows where average or the mean water level for this time of year would be. So for Shasta, we're still, we're about 41% of normal. Also, in doing this, we do this about a week in advance, so things change a bit sometimes between when we put this out to you and today's conditions. So Oroville Reservoir actually is about 45% of average for the state. Let's see, other changes. The river flows have actually picked up a little bit in the last few days. Sacramento River flows up a little bit. It's about 60% of average. San Joaquin River flow has actually picked up quite a bit. It's at about 50, a little over 50% of average now. And that's because of there's a regulatory requirement for a fall pulse flow to attract salmon and to get them back to their home stream. So that's taking place right now. Precipitation is actually, we've actually had some in the last month. October 1st is the beginning of the water year. So Northern Sierra actually is at about 97% of normal for this time of year now. So it's about 2.7 inches of rain on average across the Northern Sierra. The Southern Sierra, the San Joaquin Valley, is still lagging behind the water. The rainfall we've gotten so far has really kind of been from like I-80 north, so it's really hitting the northern part of the state. For example, Shasta Dam has had about 4 3/4 inches of rain already this season, this month, which is not bad for this time of year. Let's see, water quality is slightly better just about everywhere in the Delta now compared to what's down here, except at the pumps. And the water quality from the increased flows in the rivers hasn't quite gotten down to the pumps yet. The other change that I made here was to, I lumped the Central Valley and State Water Project, Delta Pumping, together as one number, and that really reflects how the system is operated. Both are kind of operated jointly, so the effects on the Delta really are the combined effects of those two pumping plants. On the back, I included a couple of charts here, and you'll see a lot more stuff like this throughout the poster presentations, but I'll explain this a little bit. But I think at last month's council meeting, I think Councilmember Rustaller had a question about temperature and effects on salmon. And the chart at the top shows the temperature in the Sacramento River right about the city of Redding, just below the city of Redding. And this is of concern because of an endangered species, winter-run Chinook salmon, spawning in that part of the river. And they try to maintain the water temperature in this upper Sacramento at about 56 degrees. That's the standard that they shoot for good, best survival of eggs and larvae of winter-run Chinook salmon. In this chart, you can see they managed to hold that pretty well through about the 1st of September, and then they had to cut back flow. I think it basically ran out of cold water in Shasta Reservoir. So the temperatures jumped up to around 60 degrees, which isn't terrible, but it's not good. So they do expect some increased mortality and Chinook salmon at that level. And I think it's been at about that level since then. And I think this is reflective of the same situation in a lot of streams. I've heard presentations already about impacts on salmon and steelhead from the water conditions during the drought, higher temperatures and lower water quality in this year. The other chart in the bottom, this is the chart from the California Data Exchange Center, DWR's California Data Exchange Center, and this shows you've probably seen, I don't know if you've seen this chart before, but it shows the accumulated rainfall throughout the year. And I put this in here to show where we've ended up in these last 3 water years. The shaded blue area is the average, the long-term average over the water year. And the 3 colored lines in there are the last 3 years, 2011, 12, 12, 13, and 13, 14 water years. And the reason we're in the situation we are now with water supply, we had 2 years that were well below normal and followed by a really low year this last year. So I put that in there because this water year wrapped up since the last meeting, and we're starting the new water year. And as I said previously, we're probably right about on the average line for the Northern Sierra and well below average for Southern Sierra. So I think unless there's any questions or feedback, it's just what
Sam.
I'm looking for.
Thank you very much. Larry?
Thanks for giving me my temperatures. I was in Chico on Butte Creek this weekend, and you could literally see the creek rise with the rain that was taking place up there. So they had a fairly low salmon return on that creek this year, and I'm sure that's all has to do with the drought and all. But a couple of quick comments. One, in my travels around the different conference venues, I've heard Peter, Randy, and Phil's name used positively, I might add, by other participants remarking on their comments. So,
Good to hear.
Your speeches or your talks have been picked up by others positively. I've heard no negative stuff. The conference is much clearer to me this year than it was 2 years ago. I just wandered around deer in the headlights last 2 years ago, and this year I've understood a lot more about what's going on, and when I listened to the various presentations. You mentioned NASA. Dave Bubenheim from NASA Ames down in Sunnyvale is working with me on the weeds situation, and they have one of the deliverables that they have is that they now can give and are just about ready to turn over to Department of Boating and Waterways a real-time, this is where the water hyacinths are. They have a way of basically tracking them, and they've tracked them over the years, but now they've got it down to a much more, they can show you exactly how those things move almost daily. And where I think that's important is if in the spring when they just start to pop out, we know where their little nurseries are and where they are concentrated, Boating and Waterways can actually then go out and concentrate their resources on those high productive areas so that we don't end up with all the pictures and such that we've been seeing in the news. It's amazing to me that all the various people that are now talking about the water hyacinth problem down in Stockton and other parts of the Delta, I'm shocked and amazed that there are water weeds in the Delta is how I'm looking at that, and that's kind of a takeoff from the Casablanca line. Anyway, Dave Bubenheim feels that the Delta Stewardship Council, that there's an area that we could be more involved, and this will make Peter happy, in the area of big data. He thinks that this is a prime example of where you could come in and do this and use this, and then the information that they're developing would be even more important to other folks that aren't necessarily tied directly to the invasive weed situation. So that's all my comments on this.
Great, Larry, thanks. Any other council comments? Do we have any public comment on this file item? Very good. That concludes file item 7. Peter, thank you very much. Great job on the science conference. Continuing on with the science theme, file item number 8 is a report from the chair of the Independent Science Board on the board activities, Dr. Tracy Collier. Welcome, Tracy. Keep pushing until you find something that turns the red light on.
There it is.
There you go. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Randy, Chair. I'm going to give a report on, we met on October 1st. We had a teleconference. The primary thing we wanted to accomplish during that teleconference was to get out our comments on the interim science action agenda. We approved our comments conditional on 4 members of the ISB providing some further edits on that, then went to the Delta Science Program on October 8th. Overall, the ISB was quite impressed with the interim science action agenda, especially given the time frame in which it had been put together. We had a series of 6 overarching recommendations. Some of them were more what you would call almost administrative or editorial, but the 4 big issues that we thought needed to be considered as the interim action agenda is turned into a final science action agenda for the Delta were to look at the issue of prioritization. It's a really thorny issue. It's one that science communities always have to deal with. How do we prioritize across all of the science needs in terms of how do we, with limited resources, how do we focus and try to get the most bang for the buck as quickly as we can? It's a very difficult question for scientists to address as a community, but we did suggest secondarily to that some more formal risk analysis would be very useful in the science planning for the Delta, as for a number of reasons, but one of them would be that it would help people to reach some prioritization. If you actually analyze the risks in a formal way, you then are better suited to provide some priorities. Additionally, we felt that there needed to be a more discussion given to actually, it calls for collegial work and working together across agencies, across scientific institutions, but there needs to be more thought given as to actually what that means and some examples of what that would look like. And then finally, another large issue that is, again, in a system as complex as the Delta, that's always extremely difficult, is this issue of how do you look at the whole system? We tend to reduce things down to chunks we can look at as scientists. How do you, though, pull that back together and look at the whole system? Again, there's a lot of good talks being given here at the conference about that issue. How do we look at it as a system as a whole? But again, in the science agenda for the Delta, it would be useful to emphasize that more as giving preference to those sorts of investigations that actually are trying to capture the system as a whole. So that went off. We've had a few discussions subsequent with the Delta Science Program staff. They, I think, are taking it all very much to heart, and I think they liked our comments. I don't know. I'm looking at Peter. I think they liked our comments. I didn't get any serious heartburn from the comments I got back from them. So we got that done. We also have been in force here at the conference, with the exception of the chair, me. I got in last night about midnight. Because I had some business on the East Coast I had to attend to, but I can say in reference to Randy and the Giants winning that I was on a flight from Chicago to Sacramento last night when they got the final out with the runner on third, and I was busy trying to do my talk that I'm giving this afternoon and reviewing notes for today, and I thought the plane had hit severe turbulence because it was quite raucous on the plane, but from that I concluded the Giants had won, so congratulations to the region on that. So tomorrow, we're going to hear a report out from our fish flows, and now we're calling it fish flows and other stressors because we are aware that shorthand we're talking about fish and flows, but it really is multiple stressors. So we're going to hear a report out from that small subset of the ISB that has been forming up that review process for us. We'll hear that at our meeting tomorrow at the normal location. And then we're also going to give updates on the other program or other review processes that we have going, and we'll go through that. We're also going to have a description from the ISB members that are here of the high points of the conference, the takeaway messages, and as well, 2 years ago, after the science conference, the ISB provided some feedback to the organizers as far as processes that we think could be enhanced or things to do to things to especially maintain in the conference and things to potentially look to see if they could improve. And we'll review our comments from 2 years ago and see how people think that's worked and whether we would change our recommendations going forward. But again, it really is a regional conference, and the regional people who've put this together have really done a great job, as was emphasized, using almost all volunteer efforts. I would say to the attendance, you had 1,000 registered or so and a few hundred more walking in. So in Puget Sound, we just had our regional science conference in the spring of this year, and we hit our new all-time record of 1,300 people attending. So perhaps 2 years from now, we can have a friendly competition to see how we can do as far as attendees. and compare between the two regions. But I think in both areas where I'm very familiar with what's going on in Puget Sound and now much more so here, I would emphasize what Peter said. This idea of having a regional science conference that is run by the regional science community, that is open to the policy and decision makers, it's probably of higher value than almost anything else we do as far as trying to provide a science and technical basis for advancing recovery and protection of these ecosystems. I think that's all I'm going to report. I want to keep this short so you guys can get out and mingle with more of the scientists. Any questions?
Dr. Collier, thank you. Any questions? Glad you're here.
Yep.
And look forward
I'm
to the
glad I
meeting
got here.
tomorrow.
Yep.
Thank you. On to file item number 9. It's an action item, adoption of the September 25th, 2014 meeting summary. Heisenberg moves. Damrell seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All right, so ordered. On to file item number 10, toward an integrated monitoring and assessment framework. Dr. Honecke and John Marshak are going to be the presenters.
Good morning, council members. Good morning, Mr. Chair. I have John Marshak with me as an esteemed colleague. He is, I just want to briefly introduce him. He is the Executive Director of the California Water Quality Monitoring Council, and in a minute you'll find out why that is of importance to us as the Delta science community as a whole, as well as to the council. John is housed in the Office of Information Management and Assessment at the State Water Board, which administers the Monitoring Council. And he will give you an appreciation for the work the Monitoring Council has been able to accomplish since 2008 and what kinds of recommendations are being generated from a recent review. And now that the science program is staffing up, we will have actually the resources to begin contributing to a key action that's outlined in the Delta Science Plan. And that deals with working toward developing an integrated monitoring framework. And I'm reminded of one of Dr. Connor's comments that she made right last December when you accepted the Delta Science Plan, and that was, well, first, we need to have a baseline to figure out how we are making progress over time and monitor our accomplishments. So this kind of fits right in with not just the conference, but also I think it was very topical now that we're going to start, and I can give you a sense of what baseline we're starting out with at this point, and then hopefully we'll be able to give you periodic updates toward this goal that's clearly spelled out in the science plan. So I'd like to join Dr. Goodwin in thanking you for your interest, engagement throughout the science conference. And you really all made this year's theme, making connections real. And I heard from numerous colleagues that the chairman's plenary talk was a home run. And I saw many of you in animated conversations during the coffee break, so I really wanted to thank you all for being here. So by now, most of you probably have an appreciation for why monitoring is one of the essential ingredients of those abstract concepts in the Delta Plan described as best available science and adaptive management. And that's exactly one of the reasons why it is listed as a action and a priority in the Delta Science Plan. So I'd like to give you start out with a briefing on what the state of monitoring is at this time, and then let me start out with a quick refresher on why we monitor and what we mean by monitoring, and what the data and information that is generated through monitoring activities can be used for. So there essentially two types of monitoring activities, and both need to go hand in hand if we ever want to make adaptive management operational. And Dr. Hastings is here too, so if you have questions on that particular subject, I'll ask her to come up during the question period. The first type is often described as compliance monitoring, and it relates to tracking the management actions undertaken to reduce identified stressors on the ecosystem. And the second type is effectiveness monitoring, and it relates to testing our conceptual models, our anticipated outcomes, so that we can make course corrections if monitoring results suggest that our expectations were wrong. So it's part of learning. And this all sounds pretty simple in theory, but in practice it's often tricky to find the appropriate indicators that can tell you something about the performance of our management actions. So what data should be collected that can give you a decent representation of environmental condition over time? And how do you scale project data up to determine if the goals outlined in a habitat conservation plan or beneficial use protection plans or a county's general plan are being achieved? Here are some examples. You know, a general policy in a general plan might say there should not be any net increase of imperviousness in groundwater recharge areas. So how do you monitor the effectiveness of this policy? What is the desired endpoint, and what natural variability affects your measurements? What indicates success, and what management actions are required to implement this? So, and then also what actions are more effective than others? Or another example might be a 400-acre subdivision within the zone of influence of the city of Bakersfield, and what indicators do you use to evaluate mitigation actions designed to maintain groundwater recharge functions? So that, you know, close to the Kern County Water Bank, you don't necessarily want to create more surface area that is impervious. So these are just some examples of what kind of how you can tackle overarching big questions through designing monitoring efforts in the right way. And, you know, this is just basically the different kind of steps that need to go into the thinking about monitoring programs, from documenting compliance or activities all the way up to improve how conditions are improving, and all of this has to hang together. You have to have data on in every single one of these levels. And with that, I'd like to give John Marshak a chance to give you a sense of where we are right now with integrating the multitude of monitoring programs, from the interagency ecological program all the way to individual restoration projects, and how we're trying to work collaboratively on wrapping our minds and arms around a truly comprehensive way of monitoring and tracking success.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Fiorini and members of the council.
Welcome.
Thank you. Waiting for my slides to come up here. Okay, so today I'm going to provide you with a little background on the California Water Quality Monitoring Council before reviewing our goals, achievements made towards meeting those goals, and the significant challenges we face moving forward. Many local, state, and federal agencies, regulated entities, and hundreds of water bond grant recipients spend millions of dollars each year collecting water quality and aquatic ecosystem data around California. These data must be turned into usable information to help decision makers and stakeholders understand the status of our waters and aquatic ecosystems, public health and welfare issues related to water quality, and the effectiveness of agency programs to manage our water resources. But California's system of water quality and aquatic ecosystem information needs improvement. There are inconsistent monitoring objectives and methods to collect and assess the data, Often it's not possible to bring data together from different studies and integrate them into a whole piece of information, and there's no single user-friendly place to access these data. In response, State Senate Bill 1070 was signed into law in 2006, requiring formation of the California Water Quality Monitoring Council. The legislation required that the Monitoring Council report its recommendations for maximizing the efficiency and effectiveness of existing water quality and associated ecosystem health data collection and dissemination, and for ensuring that collected data are made available for use by decision makers and the public via the internet. These recommendations were further refined in a comprehensive monitoring program strategy for California, which the Council published in December 2010. Members of the Monitoring Council represent a diversity of interests, including state regulatory, resource management, and public health agencies, regulated stormwater, wastewater, and agricultural interests, water suppliers, citizen monitoring groups, the scientific community, and the public. The Monitoring Council, go back a slide here. The Monitoring Council believes that the best way to coordinate and enhance California's monitoring, assessment, and reporting efforts is to focus first on delivering data and information that directly address users' questions. Theme-specific work groups, under the overarching guidance of the Monitoring Council, evaluate existing monitoring, assessment, and reporting efforts and work to enhance those efforts to improve the delivery of information to the user in the form of theme-based internet portals. They develop monitoring and assessment methods and data management procedures according to performance measures defined by the Monitoring Council. The work groups are staffed by issue experts representing key stakeholders from both inside and outside state government that develop a web portal devoted to their specific theme. This provides the context needed to effectively evaluate and then resolve monitoring design, coordination, and access problems. The Council's enabling legislation requires that the Secretaries of the California Environmental Protection and Natural Resources Agency conduct a triennial audit of the effectiveness of the Comprehensive Monitoring Program Strategy published at the end of 2010. The time for that audit is now. Because they are on the front lines of implementing the Council's strategy, each Monitoring Council work group was asked to review their progress towards improving monitoring, assessment, and reporting, evaluating their achievements against 6 performance measures using rating benchmarks contained within the Monitoring Council strategy. The resulting documentation has been summarized and shared with the Monitoring Council. Here is what we find. The results of the audit can be broken down into 4 areas: our goals and achievements made towards reaching those goals, the challenges we face, and where we go from here. Based on these findings, the audit will make specific recommendations to the Secretaries of Cal EPA and the Natural Resources Agency and to the legislature. Our first goal is to make California's monitoring system more efficient and effective through improved coordination among governmental agencies and non-governmental organizations. This includes identifying and filling data gaps, minimizing redundancies in monitoring efforts, ensuring that quality control measures are in place so that data are usable, in other words, of known and documented quality, and enabling multiple data sources to be combined for broader assessments than were possible before. California's Monitoring Council has made great strides in coordination, forming 6 interagency work groups to coordinate monitoring, assessment, and reporting. Work group themes include: is our water safe to drink? Is it safe to swim in our waters? Is it safe to eat fish and shellfish from our waters? And are our aquatic ecosystems healthy, specifically our wetlands, our streams, and our estuaries? An ocean and coastal ecosystem work group is in the process of being formed. Program staff from numerous agencies and non-governmental organizations are involved in these work groups. Further coordination includes our Water Quality Monitoring Collaboration Network, which provides regular seminars via the web for agency personnel, citizen monitors, and others, fostering information exchange and encouraging broader use of sound methods and tools for monitoring, assessment, and reporting, and data management. In addition, a data management work group has been formed to provide recommended best practices for data management, increased data access, geospatial information, and web development. Through increased coordination, our work groups have developed consistent monitoring, assessment, and reporting methods and data management tools. Through the state and federal partnership, the California Wetland Monitoring Work Group, one of our work groups of the Monitoring Council, has developed a state wetland and riparian area monitoring plan based on a framework from US EPA. This plan includes the California Rapid Assessment Method, or CRAM, a rapid wetland condition assessment method, and consistent procedures for defining, mapping, and classifying wetland habitats. Enhanced data management and visualization tools include the California Environmental Data Exchange Network, or CEDN, EcoAtlas, tools used by the Estuary Monitoring Work Group to bring reports, data, maps, and graphics together to tell stories about the San Francisco Bay Delta estuary. California's Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program, or SWAMP, has developed and is broadening the use of scientifically validated monitoring and assessment tools, protocols, water quality assurance practices, and data quality documentation procedures to make sure the data are both usable and accessible. Our second goal is to improve access for decision makers and the public to meaningful water quality assured monitoring data and assessment information. These goals include designing monitoring and assessment efforts to address specific management questions, turning monitoring data into meaningful information, and making the resulting data and information readily accessible. Toward this goal, the Monitoring Council's work groups have publicly released 6 question-based, easy-to-use web portals. Each portal brings together data and information to address questions commonly posed by decision makers and the public. Is it safe to swim in our waters? Is it safe to eat fish and shellfish from our waters? Are our aquatic ecosystems healthy? A 7th portal focused on the question, is our water safe to drink, is in the works. The My Water Quality homepage provides a single point of access to all of these web portals. Aquatic Ecosystem Health area of the website provides access to portals focused on specific water body types, including wetlands, estuaries, streams and rivers, and ocean and coastal waters. The California Wetland Monitoring Work Group is generating data and developing standard procedures being used by the State Water Resources Control Board to help develop a new wetland and riparian area protection policy for the state. Supported by US EPA's Healthy Watersheds Initiative, the Monitoring Council's Healthy Streams Partnership guided the development of our first statewide multi-metric assessment of watershed health throughout California. The results of that assessment will be incorporated into the work group's Healthy Streams portal. A third key goal of the legislation is to ensure that those water quality improvement projects financed by the state provide specific information necessary to track their effectiveness with regard to achieving clean water and healthy ecosystems. We hope to begin addressing this goal in the near future. Aquatic habitat restoration projects will be included within this task. Implementing the Monitoring Council's comprehensive monitoring program strategy for California involves substantial challenges. First, the legislation that required the formation of the Monitoring Council came with no dedicated funding. But resources are needed to initiate and sustain collaboration, including staff time to attend workgroup meetings and to coordinate monitoring efforts of the various agencies and organizations involved. Resources are also needed to break down the data silos within existing agencies and programs, to develop and maintain the My Water Quality web portals, and to make those data available to all. As an outgrowth of the triennial audit, each work group will develop a business plan to get a precise handle on these resource needs. While the enabling legislation required the Monitoring Council to develop the comprehensive monitoring program strategy and to send that to the agency secretaries, formal endorsement by the secretaries has never been provided, even after numerous requests from the Monitoring Council. As a result, implementation has been uneven and largely from the bottom up by volunteer efforts. Without leadership from upper management, the Council's collaborative work groups have had inconsistent leadership and uneven participation from the organizations involved. Many of the tools developed by the work groups currently have no agency home, making their long-term maintenance uncertain. By relying largely on voluntary participation and outreach efforts, many agency personnel are still unaware of the work groups and their tools that could improve their monitoring, assessment, and reporting performance. So where do we go from here? Even with these substantial challenges, California's Monitoring Council is determined to keep moving forward. We plan to build support through increased outreach to agency and program managers within the upcoming years. Each work group will identify mandates of governmental agencies that can be addressed more effectively through their collaborative processes, tools, and web portals. Outreach to agency managers will use this information to build increased support for the program. As I mentioned earlier, business plans will be developed to identify each work group's actions, necessary resources, and potential funding sources that would ensure work group sustainability into the future. The Monitoring Council's Data Management Work Group is working to develop recommendations for effectively sharing water resource information between agencies and with other data providers and users. This will directly support implementation of the soon-to-be-released Environmental Data Summit White Paper recommendations. Looking back over the last 8 years, California's Water Quality Monitoring Council has made amazing progress on a shoestring budget and largely through voluntary efforts, and we will continue to make progress into the future. To be truly successful, the Monitoring Council's collaborative work group and portal development efforts must be blended into the normal way of doing business of numerous governmental organizations, both state and federal. Both management support and dedicated funding will be needed to make this happen. I thank you and would like to hear any questions you may have.
Sure, John, thank you very much. Very impressive report. Any questions or comments for John? Phil? Oh, I'm sorry. Susan.
I need all of this conceptual material brought to a very specific example. So could you walk me through an example of how someone at Boating and Waterways or Department of Water Resources or even in the public could query one of the portals and under whichever example agency you use, check on their mandate. For example, is it safe to eat fish and shellfish from our waters?
Okay.
How would that work?
So when you look at the Safe to Eat Fish and Shellfish portal, you open it and portal navigation is based on questions. It's based on questions the public would have. It's based on questions that agency managers would have. So first of all, the question is it safe to eat fish and shellfish from my local waters? A member of the public may have that question. They're going out fishing today. Where do I go fishing where it's safe to eat the fish? So the first thing that the portal provides you is a map. On that map are highlighted any water body where the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment within Cali, PA has developed safe eating guidelines for fish from that water body. You click on the water body that's highlighted and up comes a pictogram that's in columns: 1 meal per week, 2 meals per week, no meals per week, and identifies the fish involved in each of those categories by pictures of them. So even someone who is challenged with the English language can understand what is meant by these safe eating guidelines. Then let's say someone working for the Department of Water Resources or the State Water Resources Control Board wants to see the underlying data. They then turn to another portal page that allows them direct access to the data, the concentrations of mercury, legacy pesticides, PCBs in fish that people eat. Mainly sport fish is what we're looking at so far. And these samples have been taken from California's lakes and reservoirs, streams and rivers, the Delta, and our coastal waters. So you can actually highlight our water body and bring up actual monitoring concentrations. What's the concentration of mercury in shad, in striped bass, in trout, in salmon from this particular water body? And then you can also make comparisons. Is the concentration of mercury in this water body the same or different than an upstream water body or one nearby? So all of that information is made available. In addition, there's information about, well, where did this mercury come from? So there's an explanation of, in another page of the portal, legacy mining in California, aerial deposition from our burning of fossil fuels around the world, and other sources of mercury pollution, as well as pollution of pesticides, PCBs, and other bioaccumulated pollutants. There's also information the public can use on how to reduce their risk of exposure to these pollutants and the health effects that might be caused, and then where they get more information. Also, there's information about how the public can get involved in some of these monitoring efforts, perhaps through joining a volunteer monitoring group that would be collecting samples that could help the agencies get data in a more cost-effective manner.
And
You're welcome.
maybe I can add something that is dear to all of us on the aquatic weed theme. That's one of those areas where there are remaining challenges. When we click on the portal, our ecosystem healthy, there is not yet information on there that shows the distribution and abundance of these aquatic weeds. So there are data groups and data types that need to be added to the portals, so that and hopefully we'll, with David Bubenheim's new information and remote sensing techniques that he recently validated, we'll be able to load that up. But that takes involvement. We need to get Dave into one of the work groups or have him chair one. So that's one example of data gaps, and that the Monitoring Council is still struggling with. So we want to build out these portals, and the science program obviously will be participating in that, to cover all of these ecosystem stressors and hopefully address all of those services that we eventually want to track. So to answer your first question, we're not there yet on many of those topics.
But the Council also feels it's important to look at these different factors from multiple perspectives. So different agencies, because of their regulatory authority or resource management authority, may look at a particular problem in a slightly different way. So the portals do embrace that concept and provide descriptions of these various stressors and other ecosystem health and water quality information from multiple perspectives. So for example, as I mentioned, providing the raw data that a researcher might use in their research. Also, can we roll that information up into a letter grade? Can we distill the information so the average citizen can understand, well, this water body gets an A, that other one gets a C, or maybe this one over here gets an F based on a certain water quality parameter, or by rolling multiple parameters together. That's what we're striving for.
Yes.
Can you give me a sense of what it has cost so far to get to where you are today?
That's a little difficult in that all of the efforts that have happened so far have been through voluntarily piecing together little pots of money from a variety of sources. So, for example, the first 3 portals that were produced cost roughly $50,000 to $75,000 to get off the ground. And a maintenance cost on each of them has been roughly about $25,000 a year. To add significant new data and features to a portal can cost as much as launching a new portal itself, depending on the complexity of, first of all, getting access to the data, bringing the data into a usable format, and then displaying it in a meaningful way on the portal. So all the different processes of data interpretation, analysis, data visualization need to be brought to bear. So also, some of the work groups have been utilizing the grant process to get money. So our wetland monitoring work group has applied each time they've been available from US EPA wetland program development grants. They've been very successful in each round of getting at least one grant. Those grants have been used to help improve wetland monitoring methods, standardizing so we can say, do we have net loss of wetlands or not within California? A number of programs have been put together with the grant money. Also, their wetland portal has been financed partly because of that. The State Water Resources Control Board has also kicked in unspent grant monies from time to time, monies that are returned from the grant recipients because they weren't fully spent in their work, and funneling those into the My Water Quality portal. So it's a matter of finding little pots of money here and there and trying to put it together in a meaningful way. But definitely having a dedicated funding source over the long term would make it much easier.
Phil?
John, we've talked about this before, but there are two problems. You don't have enough money, and state and other agency officials don't take you seriously, if you can allow me to summarize what you've just said.
Fair enough.
Why don't they take you seriously?
Probably because they're not fully aware. Realize that because
Aware of the need for water quality?
aware of the Monitoring Council's strategy. So the Monitoring Council published its strategy in 2010, but there's only 1.5 staff to do the outreach that is necessary.
You know, isn't part of this problem the persistent faith we all express that if we could only get good people together, they can voluntarily coordinate their activities and do wonderful things, and then 10 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later, we lament the failure to do so. And I don't know, how do you kick somebody into action?
Well, I have to say that those agency managers that I have briefed in the way I just briefed you have fully embraced the concept, and in most cases have been willing to free up a little bit of staff time to enhance some of the existing work group efforts. And this is not just state agencies. So for example, the State and Federal Contractors Water Agency, after being briefed, brought in resources to entirely fund on their cost the estuary portal development effort. They hired their own IT consultants, GIS, web development, data visualization, to take the data that the work group is putting together and then produce the portal with that. So I think that once I have enough time to get around to everybody and spread the word, as I'm doing with you today, I'm hoping that we get increased involvement from many of these programs that have not yet stepped up.
Dr. Heineke, then let's go back to where you started, which is what the Delta Science activity is all about in terms of monitoring and assessment. We're trying to get to the point where we can determine and report on the activities that are going on within the bounds of the statutory delta in the Suisun Marsh. Given the 8 years that John's been trying to document information in a larger scope and struggling with it, how successful are we likely to be? And add into that, if you, what web-based information system does the science program recommend the council use in making decisions?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, I'm an eternal optimist, and I think there are plenty of touch points in the governor's water action plan that we can link to this effort, and hopefully we'll get the resources throughout the science community in the Delta to actually then tackle the implementation plans that are coming out through the Data Summit white paper and the strategies that are already out there, and integrate those to come up with the resource requirements, and John mentioned individual business plans for the work groups, to kind of get the support from the legislature to help gradually increase the funding for this and the build out. So the staff in the science program could actually contribute to accelerating the communication aspects of this, and to make people more aware that there are tools available that already are in existence, and that whatever resources are coming from federal or state agencies or grant programs can be augmenting what already exists and gradually contribute to build out.
Maybe I could ask a question, I think, related to the one of our vice chairman has answered, because this is the way I was thinking about this, and I'm wondering not how would we do something separate, or what could we do that's not being done? Because knowing the kind of budget any of us are likely to have are the problems that Dr. Marshak's experienced, all of us live with. So I think my question is sort of the other way. Would it be possible to take the data system and evaluation system you developed and put a geographic lens on just the information that you're gathering today so that we can understand what it tells us about the Delta? And I was thinking, I always one of the things I like about the Restore the Delta guys is they got that great bumper sticker, fishable, is it fishable, swimmable, farmable, drinkable? And so if we were trying to just understand from your database, the data you've got, what can your database tell us about those 4 issues in the Delta? Would that be possible by creating some sort of geographic lens that would provide that sort of information today?
I think it would. So for example, the Wetland Monitoring Work Group developed a data storage and visualization tool called EcoAtlas. EcoAtlas allows you to bring in data about where the wetlands are, their extent, how you classify them, and also their condition. You can overlay land use information on top of that to be able to visualize, well, how does land use affect the quality of our wetlands? You can also track wetland restoration projects through EcoAtlas. So because this different functionality is all available in one tool, the Delta Conservancy has been looking at EcoAtlas as perhaps a tool to build on, as have the San Francisco joint venture and the Central Valley joint venture. How do we use a tool like this to track habitat restoration projects, not just around the Delta, but the Bay and around California as a whole? So I think these tools can be used for the purposes that you're
Well, I'm just wondering,
indicating.
could we create a geographic slice that would move from the statewide information based on your system and your displays to a Delta-specific display on our web pages, using the existing information that you have and just trying to use some geographic analysis to make that possible?
Yeah, that could be done. That could be done. Part of the biggest problem we have right now is gaining access to all the different data sources that we need.
Yeah.
So these portals have the wetland monitoring data from the California Rapid Assessment Method. They also have the wetland extent data that's been developed already by the Wetland Work Group.
That was my second question, because I was curious about the extent to which the agencies that make up your consortium require those who are subject to their regulatory authorities to actually file data with you in a format it's available. As someone who's been regulated by and both been a regulator and been regulated, one of the things that always frustrates me is the requirements to go monitor what the outcomes are for things, and then I just know how much that work ends up in some file cabinet somewhere that people lost track of when whoever filed it or whoever requested it moved away. And I'm wondering, would it be possible for an agency, or are there examples of agencies today that by regulation require that the information that you would like to have be provided to you in a format that you can use it?
Yes. So for example, water quality improvement projects that are conducted by grant recipients that receive their grants from either the Department of Water Resources or the State Water Resources Control Board are required to monitor the effectiveness of those projects and to submit their data into the California Environmental Data Exchange Network through one of 4 regional data centers around the state.
So if, for example, at some future date the council were to revise its regulations on covered actions to require that people that are undertaking certain kind of actions that require adaptive management require that they file that monitoring information with you so it'll be widely available, that might be a way to help your program ahead.
Absolutely. That would be a tremendous help.
Thank you.
Randy? Dan, I think that bumper sticker also said save the Delta, no tunnels, but I don't.
You and I have got different stickers, that's all I'm saying.
Mayor Brent.
And first, I want to commend you all for doing such a tremendous work and just the passion that you clearly have. And I clearly understand working on big tasks with less. And so when thinking about your goals, the first is collaboration, how to make collaboration happen. The second is how do we access info. The third is how to track project effectiveness. And it would seem to me that if you work backwards and focused on your third goal, which is how to track project effectiveness, if you can really define on how to make this effective in tracking projects or how that impact can actually be measured, then it would seem that you would get more agency buy-in, and then they would subsequently give you more access to information. And then
That's a very good point.
And I think that we all, and I've been in the government sector for many years, and no one wants to hear about any more red tape. And so if I think about, from grant funds or just having to get funds from different agencies, there's always the quarterly requirements and also the annual requirements. So this seems like one more step or one more report that's required. But if there was a way that we could actually track how this can be effective at the project level and also at the agency level, then it would substantiate why you really need to get this data from the agencies, because I can understand the agencies maybe kind of wanting to turn a shoulder because they're like, well, here comes more requests for more data, and which is to the point of one of the board members was that, is that data going to be stored, in a box someplace? So I definitely see the effectiveness for the tool and the utility on the public side, because people want to know, is my drinking water safe? And I deal with that every day. Can I go swimming today, with the kids in the summertime? So all of those things are really important on the public side, but the key in terms of getting the financing you need, the commitment you need, and really the weight you need to really make this tool as effective as it could be is really figuring out how can we make this a really effective tool at the project level, but also at the agency level. And that's just the recommendation.
Right, so it's not, and I would add another level from a watershed perspective as well. So not just project by project, but how do the projects within a watershed or within an area contribute to the increase in productivity of the entire system?
Recommend, because we're trying to track various things within the ecosystem, but if you really focus on maximizing the utility of one variable, and then working with those agencies, if we're measuring water quality, let's work with the water agencies and really see how we can maximize this tool. And then if we get that right, then the framework can transfer over to any other measurable indicator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? John, at the plenary session, Deputy Interior Secretary Connor shared with us that across federal agencies, they're taking efforts to make data more available and to share data. It seems to be a theme through this whole conference, is the need, the acknowledgement of the massive amount of data that we have, but the difficulty in accessing it. So I think that all feeds well into your work. And
It absolutely does. On the federal side, both USGS and US EPA have developed something called the Water Quality Exchange. So you can get access to all of their water quality data through one location. They're bringing in now US Department of Agriculture water quality data, and they're talking with the Forest Service to also bring in some of their water quality data that they acquire through their watershed work. On the state perspective, we're trying to link with that system. So the California Environmental Data Exchange Network, the water quality data of the water boards, uploads to the Federal Water Quality Exchange on a regular basis. The Department of Water Resources has received a federal grant to link their water data library to the Water Quality Exchange. The Drinking Water Program is going to link all the drinking water data again to the Water Quality Exchange at the federal level. By making these connections, we can get access to each other's data, but it takes time and effort to implement all those interconnections and to translate the data from one way of looking at it to another, because each agency calls the substance something different or monitors it with a different unit. It's difficult to create all those crosswalks, so it does take quite a bit of resources, but we are working on that.
Yes.
And I think the Environmental Data Summit vision paper that is about to come out will really help that effort for California agencies.
And I think momentum is logarithmic, and Dr. Goodwin shared a video during the plenary session that visually portrays how momentum can build and build slowly but then very rapidly. So you might want to take advantage of that
great video.
Peter, any final comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment probably Ryan was going to say this as well. So, John, you've obviously been in the front line of this for several years, and we've just really appreciated your leadership, you in the development of the white paper and identifying many of those issues. So we know that you're stretched very thin on the ground, but we did appreciate the amount of time you've put into that to make sure it fits the state's needs.
Thank you.
Yeah. John, Reiner, thank you both very, very much. Any public comment on file item 10? Nope. On to file item number 11, Delta Levee Investment Strategy Update. As promised, staff is providing the council with monthly updates on the progress of this very important project. Cindy Messer and Dustin Jones are here, and I believe, Dustin, I believe you're taking the lead on this presentation today. Well, in keeping with the fact that championships are achieved through many, many team members, it's great to have one of our staff stars making the presentation today.
Good morning, Council. As Randy alluded to, we will be giving our monthly update for the Delta Levee Investment Strategy Project. As you know, this is our project that the Council is working on to develop a new methodology for guiding state investments in the Delta levees. So some of the items that I'll be touching on today are some of the key phases that we are in terms of data gathering with the project, the independent scientific review panel, the work that's being done on the charge, which you received as an attachment within the staff report, our stakeholder outreach and engagement efforts over the last month, and what we'll be doing over the next few months leading into the winter session. And also one of our big topics recently for this week and over the last month, the Delta Levee investment issue paper. So I'll start with the methodology development and the data gathering efforts that we've been engaged in over the last month or so, and continuing to engage in with our consultants from Arcadis and their sub-consultants. This phase of the project involves continued coordination of data gathering related to the Delta Islands and their conditions, gathering information on assets and beneficiaries, and assessing threats and hazards for the individual islands within the Delta that we'll be using in our analysis. Some of the information that's been coming in so far, we've been gathering from our partner agencies such as DWR and the Delta Protection Commission, but we've also started to engage with various stakeholders and reclamation districts pardon me, within the Delta, excuse me, and gathering information from them as well. And we'll be continuing those efforts. I'm sorry. And I'll discuss the stakeholders with those folks a little bit later on. I'll start with a discussion of the independent scientific review panel. As you know, the Council's lead scientist has completed the charge to the independent peer review panel to review the methodology used to develop the levee investment prioritization tool, and then has been included as an attachment with your staff reports. And after this update, if you'd like to make any comments on that, we'll take those. Just as a reminder, we do have 7 areas of expertise that the peer review panel will be made up of, and we do have 7 experts that have agreed to participate in the panel. So the next steps will be to sign contracts with those experts and get them lined up to do the review. And the peer review process is scheduled to start from our project in April of 2015. That's when they'll be receiving the methodology from our consultants for review. Just as a reminder, the areas of expertise include the geotechnical and seismic portion, integrated risk management, flood management and hydrology, human and social issues, economics, environmental land use change, and integrated modeling. And as I mentioned, the next step will be to line those contracts up with the individuals and get those experts started. Over the last month, in October, we've been heavily involved with our stakeholder outreach and engaging locals and discussing with consultants and various representatives. In October, we met with the representatives from the state water contractors and Metropolitan Water District. We've met with consulting engineers represent multiple reclamation districts within the Delta, and we've also met with staff from the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. In October, our staff have made presentations to the California Water Commission and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And our next steps for November will be to have another presentation to the Delta Protection Commission, and we'll be presenting at the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee. One of our large items that we were able to complete this month was to start developing our technical resources pool of expertise. So we sent out email invitations to over 100 individuals that have been identified with technical expertise in various areas within the Delta. And we also asked those individuals to forward any other contact information from other experts that might be involved or would like to be involved. So we've already started receiving confirmations from several folks already that are anxious to be involved with the project and to lend any expertise that we can use. So that'll be really useful. Along with that, on our project website, within the council website, we've established a listserv so folks can go on there and sign up for updates related to the project. And we'll also be updating our project website with new fact sheets and information as it becomes available. So we'll constantly update our sources of information and reach out to individuals who've signed up on our listserv for updates. Our next steps over the next few months will be to continue to engage the stakeholders, reaching out to the public. Our first public meeting is being scoped for the first week of December, and we're going to try to have probably 2 different locations to cover the northern portion of the Delta and the southern portion of the Delta. That's how we're scoping it right now, and we'll do more as necessary, but that's how we're lining it up for now. Next item I'll get into is the Delta Levee investment issue paper. As you know, the comment session for the issue paper closed on October 27th. So far, we've got feedback from 6 different organizations on those, and the comments have been very substantial and significant, very good feedback coming in. The comments in general range from 3 to 4 pages of comments coming back from the agencies, so we're getting good feedback. I'm working through those comments right now to organize them, evaluate them. Our next steps will be to reach back out to any agencies if we need clarification on any of the comments they've made, and to start formulating answers and responses to the comments and working in any criteria within the issue paper that we would like to make improvements with. The next steps for that, like I said, was just to go through, work with any agencies to clarify comments, incorporate those as the paper, and we'll be following up within the next few months to finalize that paper. Those are the main things so far. I don't have any other updates at this time, unless you have questions.
Questions? Larry?
On page 4 of the paper, at the very end, it talks about the methodology, and at the very end, it states that tiers will provide the rationale information needed to develop long-term levee investment strategy with targeted funding to support the operation, maintenance, repairs, and restorations of specific Delta islands that are important to the state. I can't stress this enough. This is a system out there, and I don't see systems in this, and it's kind of like that game Jenga or something, where you pull out the little blocks and you hope that you get to pull one out and it stays standing, and then the next poor fool pulls his out and it all collapses. The levees are out there. They do provide support to each other, even though they may not be the armored corridor that brings the water to the pumps. So I don't know how to stress that enough, other than to continue to stress talking to the engineers that actually work on those islands every year. And the other kind of minor point was on page 2 at the very top, when we talk about kind of the condition of the levees. I'm not sure if we're putting this in or where it fits, but is there a way of compiling a chronological order or list of all the work that has been done in the levees over the last several decades to improve it? Because
when you say improvement, are you talking about like funding from specific DWR programs, or
how much money have we spent working on all these levees over the last several decades? And because even yesterday at one of the conference sessions, I had to listen again to these levees were built by the poor Chinese 400 years ago, and they're made out of peat soils that crumble and blow away in the wind. I mean, they're not all that way. I'm not trying to say that these levees are perfect. I'm just saying they're not as bad as some portray them to be.
Right.
So I'd like to take the butcher's thumb off the scale just slightly and balance it a little more.
We are working actually with DWR staff to gather the funding information that they have readily available on their subventions and special projects programs. So we are going through, getting as much cost information as we can as far as what the locals have spent, on an RD basis within the Delta, and also what the state share has been. We've been going through that, gathering information, so we do hope to include that in the next round.
And again, the stakeholders out there that work on these levees that have been in charge of them over the years, there's only a small group of them that do most of the work out there. So they know this stuff, and it's imperative that this get into this report somehow.
Yeah, we agree. We do have close contact with some of the RDs so far, and we're hoping to gauge more of them, and we're definitely wanting to get their input on these.
Thank you.
Larry, you may be encouraged to know that I have sat in on several of the stakeholder outreach meetings, and staff is receiving comments similar to the comments you've just expressed. They are hearing from the experts in the field, but not all the comments line up exactly. There is some differences of opinion, and that's the challenge that these folks have, is sorting through that to get to the priorities. Dan?
Maybe I could ask a question of Dr. Goodwin, because he's the one who drafted the charge. And I'm looking at the bottom of page 5 under the second bullet under relevance. And I wondered if that is what gets to in part to the concern of Councilmember Rustaller, that we understand not just the importance of the levee system to the protection of individual islands, but how the methodology will evaluate the contribution of individual islands to the function of the larger levee system.
Yeah, I think this concept of that you raise is certainly one of the issues that's out there. I think we need to be clear that the scientific review is actually reviewing the methodology that is laid out primarily in the Arcadis contract. And so the scientific review panel is just looking to, and yes, they'll be looking at these types of questions as part of that. So I think it's as much what actually Arcadis is being tasked with under your direction as the council. But please just remember the scientific review panel is coming in to review that methodology that's already been laid out in the contract.
And maybe if I can just chime in, just to echo what Dan and Chairman Fiorini has said, this is definitely one of the questions that has come up in topics of discussion in the meetings and engagement we've had so far in terms of looking at it as a system versus looking at individual islands. So yes, indeed, we are wrestling with that now. This is part of getting out there and engaging with the different stakeholders to understand viewpoint, concerns, information that would be available. So we're wrestling with it, and it will be part of the methodology package that we do, that Arcadis and our team delivers to the independent scientific peer review panel. So again, just to reiterate, it's high up on our list.
And you've told me this many times. I'm just reiterating it for my own self. The other issue, or not an issue, but it's we need to be somewhat in tandem with Delta Protection's little job out there of trying to figure out how we would fund this. And I think that goes to the heart of the systems issue. If you're going to ask everyone in the Delta beneficiary pays type of situation, if you've got skin in the game, you need to throw some money at this. It's again going to be a system-wide way we do this.
And as the chair of the Delta Protection Commission, we're looking forward to your report soon on the outcome of your levee investment strategy.
Well, that'll be good because
Levee assessment.
I'm dead man walking. I'm history in 2 months. So I will pass that on to Mary Pifo, the new chairman of Delta Protection, and also coming in January to Delta Stewardship.
And I think our Chief Deputy Dan Ray will affirm that the two organizations are working very closely together on these two projects. Mayor Brown?
The investment strategy, I know that I think there should definitely be some consideration to the multiple beneficiaries and then their overall reliance on the system and then even ranking their consumption. I'm just considering the impact to Southern California as a whole with the Delta because we do receive a majority of our water from the Delta. And in terms of the system, which was also brought up by one of our board members, I think it really needs to have a systematic focus because the conditions are going to vary along the Delta and with the levees depending on the compaction of the soil underneath, the consistency of the actual levees itself. But I think that there definitely needs to be an overlying assumption of where we are, what is the baseline, and then what is the necessity for improving those structural deficiencies as it relates to the whole system. I just think that's really important, and I don't believe that the systematic approach is really ingrained from the report that we received as a whole, and I think that that's really critical in how we decide how we're going to be investing these funds. And lastly, in consideration of just overall threats, I know that that was one of the main goals of the investment strategy, but to really be able to identify whether or not if it's obsolescence or if there's a lack of data or just what can we categorize what those threats are so that we can really prioritize what the funding would be in terms of necessity and feasibility, because of course we don't have a limited supply of money, and so if we could really categorize what those threats are, and then that will give us a better opportunity to rank them in terms of priority and subsequent investment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Any other comments? Then Cindy, Dustin, thank you very much for the report and the good work, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again next month.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Is there any public comment on file item 11? Yes, there is. Eric Rinkelberg.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Eric Ringelberg, local agencies of the North Delta, representing 18 reclamation and water districts and approximately 110,000 acres. Chair, Commissioners, thank you. I'll be brief. I think a lot's been said already, but I want to maybe pull some of the threads together here. We've submitted comments, and this is in addition to those comments, or hopefully supplemental to those comments. Communication, thank you very much. I think the staff has done a fantastic job of pulling together the highly varied and diverse interests of the Delta and the stakeholders, and I think you're on an excellent track for the communication side of things. What I would urge in the next phase is once you've aggregated your data on the levees, that you pull back those districts and district engineers, because one of the things we found, particularly, for example, the DREAMS study, or even DWR's most recent data, is that the data lags significantly. So the levee geometrics information, that's about a year old. Those are things that we're concerned about need to be accurately reflected for the risk side of things. So if you could have essentially what we consider a QC step once you've pulled those data together and pull everybody together in the room at the same time so that we can talk about sort of how these pieces fit together. Outcomes. We're looking at a risk strategy, and I hear some great work about how do you create different classes of levees and how that might relate to risk. But for us, we could classify levees all day long. It has been done actually several times already. What we want to get to in terms of the risk strategy is the solution side of things. How do we deal with the free riders? We're also hampered by the 218 process. So we can classify these in terms of their risk, but how do we get to the solutions? How do we look at actually identifying those people who are getting levee protection who are not paying for it, and then how do we work within the 218 process to ensure that we don't spend a tremendous amount of money in process rather than actually improving the levee condition? So that's all I had, and open for questions.
Great, Eric, thank you very much. Any other public comment? Again, thank you very much. That concludes file item 11. File item 12 is public comment. Any general comments, any thoughts, comments? Great. File item 12 is completed. Thank you all very much for coming. For those of you that followed on the webcast, thank you. That concludes the meeting. Meeting is now adjourned.